Hi, today I'll be knitting a pair of socks on my Passap e6000. The standard socks on the Passap use a short row heel. They use short rows to make the heel, like this here. Now, this is not my favorite type of heel. It's not adjustable. It doesn't wear particularly well, and you know, it doesn't necessarily fit very well. I prefer to use a heel flap instead, but it is a bit tricky to use this method on the machine. But I'm going to show you some tricks so we can get a nice fitting sock off the machine. You can make the heel flap longer or shorter to adjust for a higher or lower instep. So it's really flexible, and it tends to fit better and wears better generally because of using a slip stitch on the back. You make some bulk here, and this doesn't wear through as much. So here I have some examples of some hand knit socks that I did fairly recently, all using a heel flap method. This one, 2-color. This one has a bird's eye pattern, which is not the method we're going to be using. We're going to be using the standard slip heel. This is the slip heel with multicolor, and this is no slip on this heel. And then this is the method we are going to be doing, this one, but in one color. Doing multiple colors is trickier, and we will not be doing that today. We'll be just doing one color, and I'll be using Stylecraft Head Over Heels All Stars color pool. So I have put some on here, and I do use it from center pool. I do use it from here. Using the outside is it sticks in the bowl, so it's not going to move around well. So what I do is I actually pre-pull out like a little mini ball here. Every so often I'll pull some more out so that it's still going to be free-flowing. There's not going to be any tension here. So I'm going to load that up onto the machine. Okay, now I am using a striping yarn, so I have to decide if I want to have the two socks just be kind of random where they start, or offset where they start, or starting at the same location. So from the center pull ball, I have white initially, and then I have pink pretty quickly. So I could start either before or after the pink. I think I am going to start after the pink because it's not a very big section. It switches to blue very quickly afterwards. So what I'm going to do is pull my yarn through until that transition from the pink peach to the blue, and that's the part I'm going to secure on my machine. And so I'll remember that for next time, for the next socks, and secure it in the same place between those two colors. And then I should have both of them with the ribbing starting with this light blue. Now you have to watch out that sometimes some prints are not very consistent, and they may look like they are going to match, but they actually don't. Like there's a second part of the print, but I don't think it's going to be a big difference. If it does, if it's like very slightly, and if it does vary, then it's just going to add some character to it. So I'm okay with it not being absolutely perfect. We'll see how they turn out though. Now I am going to put my needles into work. I like my socks to be a little bit tighter than is suggested in the DM80 manual. So I'm going to have a few more stitches, and I'm going to have a smaller stitch size. So my socks are going to be 68 stitches around. For ribbing, I'm going to cast on 2 more stitches. I'm going to cast on 70 so that when I do the mattress seam on the ribbing, it loses 2 stitches, and so it's not gonna, I'm gonna do the 2 extra stitches so it's not gonna pucker at that seam because of the loss of the 2 stitches. Now you could seam differently. You could seam where it was more open, where you're not losing 2 stitches. Those definitely aren't as secure of a seam. They do have less bulk though. So it's your preference if you want to have more of an open seam where you kind of loop around, or if you want a traditional mattress seam where you're losing 1 stitch on each side. Okay, I'm going to pick up my yarn. Okay, now I'm going to put my stitches into work. So since I want to have 70 stitches, I'm going to go left 35 to right 35. But on the front bed, the last stitch up will actually be 34. And 35 will be on the back. So we have the leftmost one on the front and the rightmost one on the back to observe the needle rule. Now you don't always have to follow the needle rule, but when you are going to be doing anything tubular, circular, you want the furthest stitch to be on the last bed that you knit. So on the front, when you go past this way, the last stitch you do this way, it should be on the front, so that you're not having to pull it around to get to a further stitch on the back. And same for the right. You want it to be further back or the same side, same position or further to the right on the back bed on the other side. So when you come back around, you're not trying to go knit further than you already knit. So if you're not doing anything tubular, circular, needle rule actually doesn't matter. But it's just a good rule of thumb to follow the needle rule in general, just in case you're going to be using CX or something and you did, or HX, and you just didn't remember that you were going to be doing that. So we are going to do 1 row at stitch size 1.5. Okay, I like to cast on using a cast on comb, but if you don't have one or don't like to use one, go ahead and put in orange strippers for this first row. Now if you're using strippers, you may need to have slightly larger stitch sizes for the cast on. This is what's recommended in the DM80 manual, I believe, and I don't think they assumed cast on combs there, so hopefully it's feasible, but you may have to increase it if you're having trouble moving the lock back. Okay, so 1 row. Now I tend to like hold the yarn here so it doesn't pull back and distort the stitches on the end. Okay, for my cast on comb on, I have this handy little marker here for the center. I try to line that up with the center of the bed, and I got it. Oops, I don't want to split the yarn there. Okay, move that out of the way. Oops, I split the yarn there. This is a really splitty yarn. Okay. So then I put the wire in. To secure it, and I have to twist it around sometimes to get it, and then put the little flap facing down. Okay, now we're going to go to CX. 2 rows, stitch size increased 2.5. That's 4 notches. Okay, 2 rows. I'm not going to put any weights on. I'm just going to grab the comb from below and do 2 rows. Okay, now we're switching to NN. Increase again to your main stitch size for the ribbing. Now I like to have the stitch size a little smaller than you may have. I'm going to do 375. Okay, that's 5 notches. And now I'm going to do 1 row to complete the cast on. And then I'm going going to continue on until row count 19 when I'm going to increase the stitch size for the last row. So let's go ahead and continue, and I'm going to hold the cast on comb down for a few rows until I decided that it's low enough where the strippers wouldn't go down and knock that and get damaged. Okay, and then it would be orange strippers. Okay, now I'm going to do my heel on the front, and I'm going to put the seam in the center back of the heel. So I'm going to move a fourth. I'm going to move it all to the back and move a fourth over here. So if you want to have the seam in the center on the side, you can move half over or half over, depending if you want it left or right side, depending on where you're going to put the heel. Yeah, but so for this one, I'm going to move from front to the back. So I'm going to increase the stitch size on the front to my main stitch size. That's 475. Typically, you may do 5 or 5 1/4 for socks if you like them a little looser. Okay, and so then one row. Okay, I'm going to move my lock out of the way. I'm going to move these edge springs out of the way, front and back. I'm going to put the racking handle at about 10 o'clock, depending on how these fit. That looks pretty good. I am going to bring up the stitches in the back between and a little bit on the end so that we're not starting cold with the transfer tool, just so it has a little friction to start with, and so we're not just like all of a sudden going, we're there already, bing. So just a few stitches on either side and on the back as well. I'm sorry, on the other side. So here we have the U100E. I have it on setting 3. That's going to be independent of any pushers and independent of whether there's work on the back needles or not. And I'm going to pay attention to these arrows. So this arrow, the black arrows, are indicating what direction the work is going to move from and to. So it's going to move from the front to the back. And this arrow is which direction the transfer tool is going to move in. It's going to move in this direction in order for them to go front to back. And I have my stitch holder on too, that holded the bar. And I'm going to move this to the right of the work, snap it in, and then move this across the work. Okay, let's see, how did that go? I have a little bit of mess there. That's it. Just gonna pull that stitch up. Try to get this in the right spot. I'm actually gonna put it on the front for a second. Kind of separate this out to see about the plies. Yep. Okay. Okay, pull that down. Okay, all of them are on.